Hello and welcome to episode 432 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly Podcast of Many Topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and, well, our playthrough of the Dragon Age trilogy comes to a conclusion. In this episode, we played through over 2 episodes, Dragon Age Oranges last year, then 1 episode on Dragon Age 2 in February, and this is the second of 2 episodes on Dragon Age Inquisition, a very, very, content-rich game that took me quite a while to get through to my satisfaction, but ultimately left me quite satisfied. But let's see how the rest of the panel feels after I introduce them, starting with Wes Iliff.
Hi, everybody.
And Audra Bowling.
Hello.
And Aleks Franiczek.
Hello.
And Paul Dennis.
Hello.
Paul, Aleks, Audra, Wes. All of us managed to play a lot of Dragon Age Inquisition over the prior month plus. I think if you include Trespasser, I think my total play time ended up at right around 95 or 96 hours, and I still didn't do everything. I did a lot of things, but not everything on the checklist. Because, well, frankly, I had a really good time with this. This is my first time playing Inquisition in 10 years. I played it when it came out in 2014, but never since. My first time playing through the Descent and Trespasser DLC for sure. I think I might have started Jaws of Haakon in 2014, but didn't get very far because I would have remembered recruiting the bear if I had encountered that 10 years ago. But ultimately it was a very positive experience for me. I just kept wanting to spend more time with these characters and build up my Inquisitor and just whack things with my giant axe of the Dragon Hunter. So I was engaged for quite a long time and feel pretty good about it. But this is my second time playing the game. Aleks, this was your first time playing Dragon Age Inquisition. In fact, this whole playthrough of the trilogy is a fresh start for you, starting back in the fall of last year. How did you find Dragon Age Inquisition, your first playthrough of it? General thoughts. We don't need to get too specific yet.
Sure, yeah. So I played through the entire Dragon Age trilogy for the first time in less than a year and had a really fun time with all the games overall. But if I had to pick a favorite at this point, it would probably be Inquisition. And it's not because I think it's a perfect game. I think there's like a lot of flaws you can dig into with it if you want. But there's also just so much going on in this game, so much content, so much love behind that content that you can feel that it sort of just made up for any of the shortcomings in the kind of overall overarching design of the game. Obviously it's like kind of BioWare's first real open AAA type open world modern game, and there's kind of some downsides that come with that, such as like the fetch questy busy work we discussed in the first episodes, like things like shards that you kind of expected to walk around discovering in the different areas, kind of like uninspired quests, like side quests that you would unlock by like finding a note and then just have to like gather something. But these are all like minor issues in what's otherwise like a really impressive game, starting with just like I love the characters in this game and the kind of hub that you interact with them through. Like Skyhold is one of the best hubs I think of any video game, any RPG, because just the level of detail around it, hearing like just people hanging around the hub discussing whatever happenings have been going on at the time, the sheer amount of conversations you can have with companions, like between different missions and at different parts and kind of their individual arcs. All these companions have great personalities and personal struggles that make them all interesting and sympathetic, even the ones that I thought I didn't really like at first. And just the overall just exploring these open kind of zones, I thought was pretty fun. Like they can be like a little tedious in terms of exploring, but they all have like kind of geographical variety that make them really enjoyable to explore. They give a lot more of kind of a sense to the world of both Ferelden and Orlais that you couldn't really get from the previous games, which just didn't have that technology. So I feel like I've just got to actually see this world and live in it for the first time, and it just brought such a great sense of place to it. And even though Dragon Age Origins combat was probably more strategic overall in terms of its potential. I had so much fun with the combat in this game too, especially like from like level 10 and on. It was a bit of a slow burn to start, but just so much fun messing around with the different party members and their classes and things like that. So I mean, pretty much every aspect of this game, once I kind of honed in on the content I actually wanted to experience, just offered so much to me, and I came away from this game like just really loving it. One of my favorite BioWare games for sure.
Do you think we have to re-record that best RPGs for the PS4 episode so we can maybe knock this game up a few places?
It would definitely make my top 10 if we re-recorded, yeah.
That's even fewer points scored by Persona 5 as a result, probably.
Yeah, Persona 5 would probably have to go.
But elaborate on a couple of the points you made, Aleks. Suikoden is a series that all five of us appreciate. And when you do a lot of quests in the game and Skyhold starts to fill up and you see characters interacting, like even the specialization trainers that unlock when you first get to Skyhold still hang around. And all of the agents that you recruit, even if they don't have a lot of dedicated dialogue, will be presences around Skyhold. And seeing your base fill up as the game continues is fun in this game. And I think personally one of like the signature tenets of what makes a great Suikoden game. So that's a and I recently played Eiyuden Chronicle this year. So maybe I sort of noticed some similarities there from playing them in close proximity. And this is a point we made last episode also, but it's not an accident that this is the most open BioWare game ever made, and also comes 3 years after Skyrim set the world on fire. So maybe they got an order from EA, hey, make us a Skyrim. But the fact that we get 10 really elaborate and fun open world sandboxes in the 10 stages, 12 if you count the first two DLCs, and maybe not all of them are created equal, but there is fun, compelling activities and writing in all of them is an achievement in its own right. Audra, I know that you've played Dragon Age Inquisition before. Do you still have a high opinion of it? Like, did your opinion evolve or change playing it this time for the podcast?
Oh, it probably improved a little bit. I actually really enjoyed it the first time I played it, but I was hampered by starting it on the PS3 and having some technical hiccups, and then switching over and not quite getting into some of the later side quests because I was trying to rush through it for various reasons. And I just really liked taking my time with it this time, and I appreciated doing some things that I originally tend not to do in Dragon Age games, like choosing a warrior class as my main character's job class, and opting to go Dalish elf when I usually tend to go city elf if that's an option. So I had a really fun time with it, and I felt like this was a really good playthrough experience.
Yeah, I think my opinion improved also, because I mean I was a female dwarf instead of a male human this time around. And I feel like I when I played it in 2014 I enjoyed it, but I didn't remember a lot of the finer details of the different settings. And now, like, I played through certain areas like the Emprise de Leon and the Exalted Plains into way more depth than I did 10 years ago. And I think maybe I was just approaching it from, maybe it was in a less complete form when I played it 10 years ago, but I'm with you. I think I played more of it and I like it more now than I did 10 years ago. And moving from the PS3 load times to PS5 load times helped a significant amount. Wes, how has your opinion of Dragon Age Inquisition evolved over this playthrough?
I really loved this game when it came out, and I think part of that love was somewhat affected by having a lot of people around me who really didn't like Inquisition, and people who liked it less after playing Andromeda and almost retroactively went back and affected their opinions of earlier BioWare games. So it was a big surprise to me when I fired this up, and I was pretty excited to play it. But just even exploring through the hinterlands, I was like, holy crap, I forgot how much I love this game. The little interactions you get, the characters, one of the best casts in at least Dragon Age history, if not BioWare history. The gameplay being a lot more like moment to moment. It's funner to play. in my opinion, than either of the two previous Dragon Age games. I think Origins still just edges it out because there's a level of role playing in Origins that is very impractical, if not nearly impossible, with a voiced main character. But they get really stinking close to those highs at points where you have some really interesting choices. And honestly, replaying this made me really excited for Dreadwolf, that has its own versions of backgrounds and origins, and combining that with this trajectory they're hitting where they really want to nail the gameplay but not lose the character interaction at bare minimum. I don't know, this game like rejuvenated a lot of my love for like the future of the series, because man, this is a good entry.
Yes, I agree.
And, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but playing through this game and knowing a little bit about Dreadwolf from their early trailers and early materials on it. Pretty recently, there was a trailer showing combat customization and the skill trees, and they accidentally spoiled a couple things in there, or maybe on purpose spoiled a couple things in there. But like you can sort of tell, it's like, oh, they're probably using some of the same lore documents they have from the early 2010s. Like Mark Dara and others are still have this world to build out. I think that they are continuing seeds that were planted in Dragon Age Inquisition or earlier. And that's exciting. Like, playing through this trilogy again reminded me of why I love it so much, and made me more excited for Dreadwolf, even though it's going to a mission-based design and more action-focused combat. But staying in the present, or let's say in 2014, once again, Paul, what's your abridged thoughts on Dragon Age Inquisition after this playthrough? And it's a game I know you've played multiple times.
Yeah, this is one of many playthroughs for me. Like you mentioned Suikoden, and that was a big thing for me. Like the moment that I realized that there were some parallels between those two series was a big deal for me, and I think that was the point where I was like, okay, yeah, Dragon Age is it. Like, this is I do care about this game, because like I said in the last episode, Inquisition was the game that I started with, and I it just, once I got to Skyhold, I was like, okay, wow, this has even the same sort of like, there's always a point in a Suikoden game where you have to like flee, where there's like a big loss, and then there is this sort of like chapter of uncertainty until you find your home base, and that was certainly truncated in Inquisition, but like I still felt it. And I thought that was an amazing moment. So yeah, I think that Suikoden comparison is definitely, I agree. But like, this time I did the Templar thing, and I know I didn't have much to say about that in the last episode, but like, my opinion of the game improved once again by going through that perspective. Not because of that mission, but because like there were no redeeming qualities for Templars for me. And like, the only good Templar was like Cullen, and I still like kind of didn't love the guy or whatever. But having Templars as allies throughout this, you could see that there are some people who did see the sort of like compassionate and like caring perspective that Templars were supposed to have. They weren't supposed to be jailers, and so like, that's just like, every time I revisit the game, it just feels better and better and better, and I feel like there's always more to see, and it's always really interesting. And like in terms of mechanics, like the combat and stuff, I think Inquisition, if the shortcomings that it had were pretty similar to its peers at the time, but what it did right, like, I don't know, like, once the combat got going, I was like, wow, this is super fun, but also it's a little simpler, like Wes said, like less strategic, but it's just, I think it's well built, and I think it is way more fun to play on a controller than a lot of like these sort of like Western RPGs are.
Yeah, you can tell that Dragon Age 2 and 3 were made with console players in mind, for sure.
It was I don't know. I think that it is also it is my favorite entry in the series, but I'll leave it up to people who are better at reviewing things to determine whether it's the best entry, but it is my favorite, and I enjoyed my playthrough this time too.
A couple things. Personally, ranking the Dragon Age games, I think that Origins and Inquisition do so many things differently, but have such like high soaring strengths that I almost don't want to pick one over the other. Dragon Age 2 is a clear third place for me, but because they're so fundamentally different games that build or expand this setting that I love so well in both cases, I'm not going to pick a favorite. You talked about Templars a little bit, and I think from the beginning they wanted mages and Templars to be, let's say, equally, if not relatable, then at least on equal terms morally. Where they portray magic and demons as so dangerous in all three games, but also make Templars, instead of a conscientious person trying to protect everyone from magic, they make them into jailers and bullies, and in Dragon Age 2, just outright villains. And it's hard to find a good Templar outside of Cullen and Alistair in the first two games. But in this game, they give you they sort of show the plight of the Templar and the role of the Templar in a more sympathetic manner. They wanted mages and Templars to be on equal terms and not have mages be sort of pro freedom and pro magic, and Templars be pro control and anti magic. And the second thing I want to say is, playing these games again made me remember how much I like them and appreciate Inquisition more. And I'm dangerously close to just replaying them all again. And I've spent probably 100 hours over those three games, or probably 200 hours playing those three games over the course of a year. And that's not a small ask. So yeah, I'm more excited for Dragon Age than I ever have been since first playing them. And yeah, bring on Veilguard. But that's not the whole episode. Where we left off last time was sort of at the doorstep of two different quests, which I don't remember their exact names in the storyline. I'd have to look those up. But one of them is basically the Winter Palace or Empress of Orlais quests, and one of them is the Western Approach Grey Wardens quest. So let's start in Orlais. Basically, after you reach Skyhold and establish yourselves a little bit, you discover a plot to kill the Empress of Orlais, and Corypheus is definitely behind it, at least in part, because he wants to throw the country into chaos so his Venatori and his Red Templars can seize power more easily. But this is a sort of diplomacy, dialogue-driven part of the game, similar to parts of the Landsmeet quests in Denerim, in the first Dragon Age. And my feeling is they included this kind of story to bring back that kind of setup that was not present in Dragon Age 2. And if you remove the stress of moving through areas with a timer and a countdown, both of which I hate, I think this is a really exciting part of the game.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah, I really loved the setup of this quest. Just kind of being more like setting driven, dialogue driven, things like that. How you kind of have like your companions you can bring in, and like you see them all kind of trying to mingle and find a place in this like very aristocratic sort of setting. So it's interesting to see like how like Solus adapts to it versus like Cole versus Cassandra. That was my party. They all had kind of their separate fun reactions. But yeah, I mean, to your point, there is some like kind of frustrating elements to the quest in terms of like constantly clicking like the L3 button, trying to look for like those hidden, I don't even know what they were, glyphs, keys, or something that you need to like access certain parts of the palace.
Statues.
That's them, yeah, the Hala statues. And then yeah, having to like rush whenever you get to like sort of outside of the party. Very interesting idea. I like what they were going for, but in practice it wasn't super engaging, but still it really served to like elevate like the atmosphere of the quest, make it feel like you are kind of in this political sort of situation, and you make some like very interesting discoveries about like the three different political candidates essentially that you can side with, between like Empress Celine, her brother Gaspard, kind of like a military guy, and Celine's ex-elf lover Briala. So you sort of go to these different little like secret rooms, find out bits about them, can confront them about like the bits of information you find. So it does have like this really like kind of like dynamic, evolving element of diving into political intrigue that I appreciated.
First of all, I think Gaspard is the Empress's cousin, not brother. But Gaspard's sister is Florian, who is also the Empress's cousin, and she plays a role in the in this part of the game as well. But yeah, it's the sort of three factions going for the throne. You by exploring the setting and sneaking around and talking to people. There's a favor stat you have to build. You can uncover evidence on the three factions and then manipulate who ends up seizing power after these events. Based on how much information you find, how high your favor stat is at the end, and decisions you make when you have all of your resources at the conclusion of the quest.
So the quest is called Wicked Eyes and Wicked Hearts, and all of the main quests in the game are verses from the Chant of Light. And a fun aside, the Sollosis' personal quest is an anagram for Fen'Harel Dreadwolf. So they're pretty neat quest names in general. But yeah, this is honestly one of my least favorite quests, but I still quite enjoy it. And it's just a little low on the action. And then there is also the fact that those Hala statues, there's not enough of them to open every door that requires them. And so, that bothered me a little bit. But also the grand game is just as large a part of the Dragon Age universe as the sort of more primitive Ferelden oriented things, So it's harder for me to follow, but still, like, I can see how it blows up the scope of the world that they're creating, and so like I can appreciate it even if it doesn't entertain me as much as other parts of the game.
I just wish I hadn't gotten lost in one part or stuck trying to get one of the statues and then lost a bunch of favor.
Oh, yeah.
Was it in one of the courtyard areas?
I believe it was the one in the kitchen where you have to jump up onto a railing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
right.
There's the Hala statues in the rafters, isn't it? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I remember that in like the pantry area. I did have enough Hala statues to get evidence on the Empress at the end, but I walked around a lot and I saved frequently after a good run. I had multiple saves in the middle of this because I was really paranoid on losing a lot of favor by wasting time. And if I lost more than a couple points, I would reload a save with a better idea of how to move on. And the favor stat is weird. It's like you can it drops down whenever you're away from the party because people will think you're being unfashionably late. But like if you go back to the party after the first warning, then you'll lose favor again because then that you're uncool for being so early. It's so weird. But you actually, Florian's the hostess of the party, and there's a sequence in the middle where you dance with her and can sort of be coy and mysterious with her. And if you answer in a suave enough manner, then you then you actually gain more points of favor with the court. It's so weird, but you basically have to sort of act like a bard, and engage in only occasional fighting instead of, say, a dungeon that's mostly fighting for this whole quest. But by the end, you can sort of choose who to support, whether it's Briala, who is now one of the leaders of the Elven rebellion of the Dalish elves in Orlais. So she wields power on her own, not just being a former lover of the Empress, or Gaspard, who has more support from the military, and Celine, who has more support from the nobility. You can force them all to work together and keep Celine as the Empress, or you can choose to have one or more of them executed, with the one that you choose being in power if you have evidence on all three. But if you have only evidence on one or two of them and not all of them, that limits your choices a little bit. I don't know what my favorite option is, but I did put Gaspard on the throne, but I also had Celine reconcile with Briala, and that meant I got to have one of my favorite NPCs, Michel, the Chevalier, who you meet in the Prise de Lyon, who was unfairly ousted from the court. You can have his status reinstated if you support Celine or Gaspard at the end. And I thought that was a nice little sort of postscript to the Winter Palace stuff. If you help out Michel, who helps you take the fortress and then Prise de Leon if you meet him before capturing the fort. But yeah, overall, I think I appreciate that this kind of quest is in the game, because they I mean, BioWare wants to have parts of Dragon Age driven by dialogue and diplomacy and not just fighting your way through everything. I wonder if this was too hard a swing in that direction, like the pendulum going a little too far, only because I find some things like the favor system annoying. But ultimately, I had a really good time with this. But I don't have to do this ever again because I was careful enough that I got the achievement for 100 favor.
Hey, me too.
Yeah, so yeah, get out. I don't have to worry about that forever. And if I replay the game, I'll just be extremely reckless.
No, I am also kind of the same mind. Timers and stuff in games do not make me happy. But I loved this chapter just because I felt like it got me about as invested in the role playing in Inquisition as any other quest has. It was choosing who to support and how to do it. Kind of makes you think on what kind of person is your Inquisitor, because there are a lot of different outcomes of this. And all of them kind of feed into a certain type of attitude. So my Inquisitor, I very much made she's dedicated to the cause of the Inquisition, which is removing Corypheus from the equation and dealing with the Fade being up and strong, or the Veil being up and strong. So she, just went for the quick fix that probably won't work long term of getting everyone on the same page to work together. Yeah, eventually court intrigues are going to happen again. Someone's going to kill someone else. Stuff's going to happen that makes this not hold together long term. But my Inquisitor, she doesn't care about that. She just wants, okay, this will give me the most support towards the goal that I am dealing with right now. Forget what comes after. I am solving this problem right now. Which gave me a better feel for who my Inquisitor was and made me make kind of different decisions than I would have before after that fact. And I love quests that kind of inform who your character is,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had the same outcome. I made them all work together. My Inquisitor was the sort of like mom who was sick and tired of the kids fighting. But also like the Inquisition, while like having political power or whatever, like they only exist to fix this problem. And so the idea that I should be going around fixing every country's like political issues is, I don't know, like that seems a little too it seems like out of the scope of my responsibilities. So it was just like, listen, I will like stick everything together in a way that gets me enough support to eliminate this issue. And then, when I'm done with it, well, we'll talk about that when we get to Trespasser. But yeah, no, I think my Inquisitor was the exact same way.
Yeah, my Inquisitor was very much pro elf, being like an elf mage. Ended up romancing Solus. Just went really elfy on as Sarah would call it, on most decisions. So I was going to support Briala, just kind of being the clear kind of elfin choice. But once I discovered the sort of history behind Celine and Briala and ended up talking to both of them about it, the fact that they wanted to sort of reconcile and get back together, I ended up seeing that ending through, because my Inquisitor, aside from just being like very looking out for elves and mages, also just listens to her advisors when it seems sensible. So to have like the support, the more stable support that Celine provides, while also keeping Briala sort of in the picture, felt like a sensible decision.
Oh, that was my approach too, actually.
My Inquisitor is a no-nonsense dwarf who mostly cares about the Inquisition getting stuff done. So I went with Gaspard, and yeah, didn't like that I was immediately penalized for being a dwarf when you start the ground game. If you're any race other than a human, you start with -10.
They did not like my Kunari.
Yeah, and if you're a mage and not a rogue or a warrior, I think that's a -5 or something like that. But so yeah, it's this quest is good, but we really need to move on. The other sort of tentpole quest in this mid part of the game is what I refer to as the Grey Wardens quest. You first meet up with Varric's friend Hawk, the main character of Dragon Age 2, and your Hawk can import directly from Dragon Age 2 to this game if you link your save directly. But there's a more generic appearance for Hawk if you use the Dragon Age Keep website to sort of forge your Dragon Age 2 playthrough. But you can choose, I believe, what their job and gender is at the very least. But you meet up with Hawk, and Hawk says they have a Grey Warden contact that is investigating the mysterious behavior of the Grey Wardens in Ferelden and Orlais, because a lot of them seem to be gathering at this one specific point in the Western approach and leaving their posts in other parts of Ferelden and Orlais. And who their Grey Warden contact is depends on your decisions from the previous 2 games. That Warden contact can be Alistair, if Alistair is not exiled, not executed, and not made into the king in Dragon Age Origins. So he basically stays a Grey Warden, but also survives the events of the Battle of Denerim. The Grey Warden contact can be Terran Loghain, if Loghain is drafted into the Grey Wardens at the after the events of or at the end of Dragon Age Origins, and also survives the game. But you can execute Loghain, or Loghain can be the sacrifice for the Archdemon. And the third option, if Alistair and Loghain are both either exiled, executed, or in Alistair's case, if he's king, he won't be the contact. Your third option is Stroud, who is a Ferelden Grey Warden who has a couple minor appearances in Dragon Age 2. I believe he's the one that does the joining for Bethany or Carver, if either of them is made into a Grey Warden. But otherwise, he's Stroud is kind of the replacement character if Alistair or Loghain doesn't show up. And for me, I had Loghain make a really fun surprise appearance. And what it boils down to is Corypheus has seized control of a couple people within the Grey Wardens organization, and he's convinced them, these people at the top have convinced them to do a large blood magic ritual to seize the power of demons to fight Darkspawn. When really, if the blood magic ritual is completed, all of the Grey Wardens will fall under the thrall of Corypheus. So your Warden contact has discovered this and shared it with Hawk. And you team up with both of these people to stop the ritual from happening at a fort in the western part of Orlais. You fight through a bunch of demons and a bunch of wardens that are already mind controlled to stop them at the top. And this goes into a section of the game that is maybe a dirty word for anyone that finds a certain part of Dragon Age Origins frustrating. You go into the Fade, and now I'm skipping over a lot of lore here, and I'm sorry for that. Basically, Corypheus has made a deal with a powerful fear demon in the Fade that gives Corypheus the control of a large demon army that is able to spill out through the rifts made from the experiment that Corypheus did in Haven, and also using sort of these demons and blood magic to try and take control of Grey Wardens so that they can join Corypheus's army of Venatori and Red Templars and demons. But to prevent all this from happening, you stop the ritual and you're dragged into the Fade, and you have to confront this fear demon. And it depends on who's with you, but you end up going through this dreamy sequence through the Fade. You get into contact with the previous Divine Justinia, who and she unlocks memories of what happened to the Inquisitor at the events in Haven, where you discover that they were just that Corypheus was trying to use a large number of people as a sacrifice to open the Fade, to open a hole between the Fade and the real world. You stepped in and prevented it from happening, so that the power to open and close rifts was engrafted onto you rather than Corypheus. And Divine Justinia saved you from being dragged into the Fade, which is why your character was the only survivor. Depending on who's with you in the Fade, your different characters will confront their fears presented to them by this fear demon. It's a fairly lengthy area. There's some light puzzle solving you can do to get small stat boosts that's not nearly as obnoxious as the stuff in Dragon Age Origins. I'm already talking too much, but I'm almost done, I promise. But after you fight this fear demon, the final really high impact decision, which I remember being devastating 10 years ago, but less devastating for me now, maybe. Ultimately, one of your two new allies has to stay behind and sacrifice themselves to save so that the rest of your party can escape. And by two new party members, I mean either Hawk or your warden contact. And so for me, this was choosing between my Lady Mage Hawk and Taryn Logain, and for who to stay behind. And before I go into it, I'd like to ask any of you, was there any part of this section of the game that stood out to you in a positive or negative way? And then at the end, who did you choose to stay behind?
Well, yeah. I mean, there like it was. So I had Cole with me, and Cole is of course from there. So that was interesting. I had Solus as well. That was interesting. But the cool thing is, when you have Cole with you, he'll tell you that that like fear demon or whatever isn't it wasn't this great like evil presence before. It started off just trying to help by taking away people's fears so that they could move on. And it's Corypheus that sort of twisted him into the evil presence that he is. And so like that stood out to me a lot. And also the part where and I think this happens no matter what your party composition is, but where you find out that like the rest of the people in your party might not be seeing spiders as those enemies. And so like it gives you the sense that everyone is seeing what they're afraid of, and so like the whole place is sort of customized to them. But my choice ended up being I had this time through Alistair and then the default Hawk, and I let Hawk stay behind because the whole thing kind of happened because he didn't. I'm not blaming it on him, but like he had the guilt of allowing Corypheus to like live or whatever. But I also did have the context of knowing that like you could make decisions about the Grey Wardens after this, and I was like, the Grey Wardens are going to need a good leader, and so I wanted Alistair to survive, and so Hawk stayed behind.
I rather like the ambiguity with the Divine Justinia character that you meet in the Fade, because they kind of go into is she really Divine Justinia, or is she like a spirit that's just took her form? And they never are quite clear about that. And I thought that was an interesting plot development.
Yeah, honestly, I thought that that thing with Divine Justinia is similar to Cole. How Cole was a spirit of kindness or compassion or mercy that sort of took the form of a young mage named Cole that was abandoned at a mage circle, and the resultant is this person who's both a spirit but has the appearance and memories and experiences of that of the human that they're taking the form of. So I think that this is, again, I don't think it's 100% established, but I believe that this Justinia is a spirit of justice or righteousness or something. It's definitely a positive presence that's helping you and not a demon tricking you. But they took Justinia's form when Justinia was probably about to die or dying, and but is carrying on Justinia's will by waiting for you and helping you when you enter the Fade. Is my feeling, but I don't think that is set in stone.
No, I think that's a pretty good theory about it.
Audra, who did you have as your warden there, and who between Hawk and the warden stayed behind?
I had Stroud, and unfortunately, I chose him to stay behind just because I couldn't let go of my Hawk.
Stroud seems like an easy choice, honestly.
It was one of the easiest choices I made in the game, because I could see it being a lot harder if it was Alistair or Logain, and you have that kind of background with them from Oranges. But the fact that I did play Dragon Age 2 and use the default looking Hawk, so that Hawk looked very much like my Hawk. I'm just like, this player character I experienced for like 40-ish hours versus this guy Stroud. That was a pretty easy one.
Yeah. Still sucks, but
for me, it was an easy decision-ish, but I didn't have Stroud. I had Logain, and I feel like my feeling was that because Loghain was made into a warden 10 years earlier and lives with the guilt of betraying Ferelden and all the poor decisions he made in Origins, and was sort of forced into being a warden and then lived the rest of his life in servitude towards the warden cause, this felt like a good ending for Loghain. Like, he'll die a noble death, saving a bunch of important people, and but also sort of his long fight is over, is how I approached it. So yeah, I had Loghain, which is also how my favorite playthrough of Oranges went many years ago, and saved my Lady Hawk, but I don't feel bad about it. Like, this felt like a cool ending for Loghain. But if it was Alistair versus Hawk, I would have been absolutely in pieces. I'm not sure how to make that choice, because I want Alistair to live happily ever after, damn it.
Well, also, like, there's no confirmation that whoever stays behind dies.
They're just trapped in the Fade until further notice.
Yeah, but we know what Sollose's, like, goals are. Well, I mean, you don't like if it's your first playthrough or whatever, but like, we all have the context of that, and I did too, and so, like, I've allowed Hawk to do it before because of that, like, because, like, hey, I think I could get this guy back, and also he's like a badass. So
yeah, I also had Loghain, and I was a little bit like, my character was a little bit crueler in some ways. That Loghain became a Grey Warden as a punishment, and it's too peaceful of an end for him to go down in a blaze of glory and be remembered for greatness. I think it is the bigger imposition upon him to have to go back and try to rebuild this busted group of Grey Wardens who have been absolutely decimated. Meanwhile, Hawk deserves a hero's end. They've already done their part for Thetis, so I'm fine with Hawk having that glorious end, or possibly surviving. Hawk is more likely to survive in my mind than Loghain would be in this fight, and potentially be able to escape later. So I kind of chose the, no, Loghain, your work isn't done yet. You need to make up for all the bad things you did. So I'm going to force you to keep at it.
Oh man, so I decided that Loghain's punishment had gone on long enough, and you're like, absolutely not.
No, you are the worst, Loghain. You deserve more. I also found myself liking Loghain a little bit more in Inquisition. Like, it really humanized him and showed his absolute willingness to repent and to dedicate himself to the Grey Warden's cause. But it was also one of those, like, in character, I liked the idea of, like, no, your life is dedicated to the Grey Wardens until you no longer have one.
yeah, and I mean, that is like, the Grey Wardens are similar to, like, the Night's Watch from, the Game of Thrones fame or whatever, and this is a little more, I guess, glamorous. Like, people have a little more respect for the Wardens, but that is how they're supposed to die. Like, you don't die of old age, and so, like, you start hearing the calling, and every warden either dies on the surface or they die in the deep roads, fighting the darkspawn, and that's what the calling is, and that's why this was an emergency, because your warden contact is like, yo, all of the wardens are hearing the calling, and so that's what made the leadership of the Grey Wardens susceptible to this plot by, I think his name is Aramond, Corypheus's guy. She was like, this is an emergency. Everyone is going to die. We need to, like, end this so that there is no need for the Grey Wardens, after we're gone. And, it was that desperation that caused the whole Grey Warden quest.
Right. And I mean, I think the comparison of the Grey Wardens to the Night's Watch is fair. But I think that the respect from the Grey Wardens comes mostly from the fans and not necessarily from the setting. Because remember, the Grey Wardens are sort of are sort of not neglected, but they're sort of a forgotten group at the beginning of Oranges. But people don't even believe that there is that there could be a blight again, and so they're like people sort of can't believe that the Wardens are coming back in that way. So I think it's mostly the fans that have this much
Yeah,
respect
you're
for the
probably right.
Wardens, and not the world of Orlais or Ferelden, as it were. But the end result of this, no matter what, is that you stop the ritual and you have some number of Grey Wardens left that are in somewhat disgrace because they almost were enslaved by Corypheus and definitely fought the Inquisition when they should not have been on different sides. And you can choose to exile them and send them back to Weishaupt, which is the Grey Wardens headquarters in the far north of the continent, or you can recruit them to your cause, or you can. I think you can probably let a lot of them die. But I mean, me being who I was, the power hungry lesbian dwarf, I had them join us. I just wanted more forces for the Grey Wardens, and I put them to work on the war table, stopping a darkspawn incursion in the western part of Orlais. So I feel okay with how it ended. But yeah, for being one of the central parts of the main story of the game, I thought this whole Grey Wardens part of the quest was cool.
How did your war table quest chain for them turn out?
Well, you can there's a bunch of decisions that you make about what to do with Darkspawn, and I believe that Cullen's side is always to use the Grey Wardens, while Josephine and Liliana always suggest using other resources. And if you use the Grey Wardens too many times, then they die out and you can't use them anymore.
Yeah.
So your final reward is less. But if you only use them, I forget the exact number, but if you use them a maximum of 2 times out of 4, or maybe it's 3 times out of 4, then the Grey Wardens survive and you get a better result on the final version of that quest.
Yes.
I did survive because I almost always choose Liliana as the option because I like the idea of using sabotage and espionage in war table events. So I think I used the Wardens a couple times and Liliana a couple times, so they ended up surviving for me.
It's actually like a little more nuanced than I thought it would be, because yeah, I assumed like just using like Cullen's, like just put them on the front line kind of approach would be what like gets the most losses. But my misstep in that war table quest line was actually when I used Josephine one time to contact like the other nobles, kind of because like that war table quest line at one point goes to chasing down this one kind of Orlesian noble. So I used Josephine to try to contact the other surrounding nobles to where she went, but they were actually ended up being loyal to that kind of escaping noble, and they actually ended up like betraying us, and that ended up setting up a trap that got a bunch of wardens killed. And so I lost a bunch of them by the end of it because of that. So that was like kind of one of the most engaging of the war table quest lines, really trying to read all like the different approaches of the 3 advisors and thinking about what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it was a fairly interesting war table assignment. Unfortunately, my Grey Wardens did not survive very long. I made bad choices.
Oh no.
But speaking of optional assignments, there's a lot to do in this mid part of the game. Like if you just put the bare skeleton of the Dragon Age Inquisition storyline together, it's not very long. It's like you have the intro, then you choose mages or Templars, then then Haven Falls and you go to Skyhold, then you have these 2 quests we just discussed, then the Well of Sorrows quest, which is coming up next, and then Endgame. That's only 5 or 6 important plot points, but they're gate kept a little bit by accumulating enough of the power stat in order to start them. So you're forced to engage with optional content at least a little bit so you can get to the next story content. And I think many of us probably did way more than the minimum amount of side content to get enough of a power stat. But like war table quest chains, like we've been discussing with this Grey Wardens one, happen all the time in this game. You'll stumble across something either at Skyhold or in the world somewhere. It'll make something appear on your war table, and then you sort of start a choose your own adventure style side quest that's handled inside dialogue. And a lot of stuff happens this way. Like you can do a correspondence with Zevran from Dragon Age Oranges, where if you have Liliana help him, he'll escape some Antivan Crow assassins and maybe do a little bit of assassinating for you. There's a way to get in contact with the hero of Ferelden, the main character of Dragon Age Oranges, if they survived the events of that game, to for them to send you back I think a Grey Warden Griffin armor or something for your appropriate class. There's and the individual character quests, which unlock if you reach a certain level of friendship with a given character, and this is true for all 9 of your companion characters, as well as Cullen, Leliana, and Josephine. So you have these 12 character-driven side quests that sometimes appear on the war table, sometimes more directly with stuff in Skyhold that you can pursue, and a lot of them have meaningful changes at the end. Like, I'll go into Cole's for a minute, because Cole's one of the more interesting ones to me. Cole is feeling torn with his existence as a spirit or as a human, and his human side wants to confront the Templar that allowed him, the original human Cole, to waste away and die. And you help him do that, but then and then through some war table stuff, obtain an amulet that will either bind Cole to the human world and make him fully human, or release his part of his humanity and get a deeper connection to the Fade, making Cole more spirit than human. And it's more nuanced than that, but I'm just trying to hit the highlights here. And so you go on this quest and this dialogue choices with Cole, with Solus and Varric being sort of your advocates in this. Varric supports Cole discovering his and getting more in touch with his humanity. Solus supports Cole like strengthening his connection to the spirit world, and you can choose to make Cole more spirit or more human, and it affects Cole's dialogue and story ending a little bit, because every character gets an epilogue at the end of the game. And depending on what choice you make, like Cole's portrait when you do party selection changes as well. But so the character driven side quests in Dragon Age Inquisition, I think, are all really good and really worth exploring. I don't want to talk about all 12 of them, because then we will be here all night. But does anyone have a favorite one or a standout one that they want to bring to the table? I know which ones I would want to talk about, if not all of them, but let's go with what the panel here thinks.
The Iron Bull was awesome.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, his was just great. I love the whole choosing whether or not he stays loyal to the Qun or sides with the Chargers. Although I can never not side with the Chargers and protect them. And I ended up really liking Sarah's more in this version. I hadn't really opened up a lot of her quest lines and special dialogue before, but I really liked doing the pranks this time with her and actually seeing more of learning about her past with the woman who adopted her and the cookies and stuff. It was actually very interesting, I thought.
Yeah, Sarah's upbringing is not as simple as just being a street urchin that became a supporter of Red Jenny. Like, she lived a full life and was the ward of a noble woman, and then went to the streets and developed a very anti-establishment worldview. I think she's more sympathetic than a lot of people give her credit for. She's not one of the more loved characters among the fans, I think. But her character specific side quest is taking down a nobleman that thinks she's the real 100% Red Jenny and not just a sort of a part of the chaos that is the Friends of Red Jenny. Amusingly, you can sort of force the nobleman to support you monetarily, or you can just straight up kill him. But I think Sarah basically likes any option that isn't just setting him free.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe I'm biased. I had my Inquisitor marry Sarah, so maybe
Same.
maybe that's just how I feel about our chaotic good elf lady. But if I think there's a highest impact one of these character side quests in terms of how it affects the character, number one overall might be Blackwall.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Anyone want to talk about what happens to this poor sap?
I mean, I made mention of him. Like, I didn't do his quest this time, so I don't have it fresh in my mind. Not that the last episode demonstrates that means anything, but yeah, I think that's why so Blackwall, not a warden, right? Like he hasn't gone through the calling or the ritual or whatever. I forget what it's called. And he was just sort of a scoundrel beforehand, and traveled with another warden named Blackwall until he died. And then so he just kind of carried on as Blackwall. which is a sort of Zack and Cloud scenario. And but the thing is like over time doing that, he like became a good guy, and that's why I said that I really liked Blackwall. And I think that if you have an Inquisitor who is like romantically involved with him while you go through that quest, whether I don't know if it's affected in the dialogue or whatever, but for me it felt like it was pretty powerful to go through a situation where like his character is questioned and then he comes out the other side like being the guy that he like quote unquote lied to you about being. He is a good man, and he is everything that like a Grey Warden should be, just doesn't have the blood.
Yeah, poor old Tom Rainier has been pretending to be Blackwall for years now, and the way this quest can resolve can be really interesting. I actually fell out of friendship with him because I had a good relationship with Blackwall, nay Tom Rainier, but then after he saved the man on the gallows and outed himself as this former Elysian knight captain and murderer, he willingly went to prison. But if you use connections to get him out of prison, then he and force him to stay with the Inquisition as a soldier, then you aren't friends with him anymore. It's like friendship ended with Inquisitor for making me not pay my penance like I wanted to. So I'm not sure if there's a way to use dialogue to get through this, or maybe you have to be in a romantic relationship with him to get a sort of more neatly favorable outcome. But yeah, I to keep him on my team and free him from prison, I had to end my friendship with him. That's how much of a noble soul he is, wanting to pay the price for what he did and confront his past.
So did you get like a pop-up message that like your friendship has ended with him?
No, but he didn't respond to me positively anymore, because the only way you can gauge friendship in this game is how they respond to you when you talk to them. He was clearly upset with me. And he was not cordial to me anymore, but I also wasn't in a strong relationship with him, and there was no romance. So I don't know how much it goes the other way if you can recruit him in a way that he likes more. Again, I'm not sure the different ways it can go, but I think I ended my friendship with him to save his life.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I wasn't in a romantic relationship with him, but I did have I think I had a decent amount of approval, and it didn't seem like he was a little reluctant to accept the mercy, but I think overall we were still pretty close, and he was still responding positively to me. So I wonder if it was just a certain dialogue choice you make during the kind of judgment of him, or if it all ties to how much approval you had with him beforehand. That's interesting.
Yeah, I had a pretty high approval rating with him. I wasn't in a romance, but I ended up somehow maintaining that friendship after the judgment.
You can also send him to the Grey Wardens, is and he approves of that too.
Yeah, and I didn't do that. I just had him come back to the Inquisition. But probably either my approval wasn't high enough, or one of the decisions in his judgment he didn't like. But it seemed clear to me that he did not like me anymore, which I thought, but was still on my team, which I just thought was a fascinating final result.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's interesting.
Sometimes you get some really interesting results.
It's yeah. He changes completely how he interacts with you at that point, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so we already shouted out two of my favorites of the companion quest lines in Cole and Blackwall, but I'd say my other in the top three would probably be Leliana, and her companion quest line is basically that after the Here Lies the Abyss quest, she gets a posthumous letter from Divine Justinia asking her to go back to the cloister she used to practice at. And Leliana's character arc throughout this game has just been really interesting. At the beginning, I remember talking to her, and she was really broken up about Justinia's death, and she's clearly a very faithful person. So she was just kind of torn and reckoning with all of that, the guilt and whatnot. So you accompany her back to this cloister where she reconnects with one of the sisters she used to practice with. And after doing like a little bit of exploring around the cloister, it kind of gets revealed that this sister was, I can't remember exactly what the detail is, but it was sort of a little bit of a setup. And so Liliana confronts her, it kind of puts like a dagger against her throat, and you either get to let Liliana kill the sister, or ask her to spare it, kind of like de-escalate the situation. And me being an elf mage who has no sympathy for the Templars or the Chantry, and also had been talking to Liliana about kind of just like letting go, just let her kill. And that was definitely kind of one of the more impactful decisions I made and was sitting with for a while afterwards. But it ended up really like kind of hardening Liliana, letting her like sort of get over her attachment to Divine Justinia. And she eventually became kind of the new Divine, with that sort of harder, relentless kind of focus in mind, which is exactly what I wanted. So I felt a little manipulative, but it was also just a really interesting quest line with some fascinating overall results for the world's lore.
Oh yeah, mine actually, she ended up being my divine too, but I kind of went the opposite direction with her development. So she, I guess, softened.
Yep.
Is how you
That's hardened and softened seems to be the terminology the community uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that hardened is a condition that can happen to Liliana or Alistair in Dragon Age Origins, where if you if their personal side quests go certain ways, and hardening them gives you more dialogue options later in the game. Like I think that Alistair is less likely to be a willing king if he's not hardened with the quests with his family. But going back to these character quests, they're all good. I mean, Varric encounters his past a little bit and helps out his old friend Bianca, who is probably the namesake of his bow. Dorian confronts his dad. You can choose to tell Dorian about this, about a meeting that his dad is trying to arrange, or you can keep him in the dark about it and just lead him to the meeting place. But basically, his dad seeks reconciliation, especially since Dorian is probably going to end up his sole heir. Which other ones I'm forgetting? Cullen goes into has been going into lyrium withdrawal because he's stopped taking it as he's trying to, divest himself from the Templar Order. Cassandra is trying to rebuild the Seekers, her old Templar Order that raised her. Josephine is again, she's from a merchant family in Antiva, but it turns out there's a price on her life from some old enemies of her family, but everyone in that family died out a long time ago, so you have to reinstate her old enemy family and convince them to remove the hit from the Orlesian Assassins Guild, or you can try to break into the Orlesian Assassins Guild to remove the contract on Josephine's life. There's a lot of really well written and fascinating character specific quests. That which ones are your favorites probably depend on just which characters are your favorites and the different directions they go. I don't want to talk about all 12, but all 12 are worth exploring if you play the game. I did all of them and don't have any regrets about them, except for maybe a few of the decisions I made, because I probably would have liked to stay friends with Blackwall. But the fact that there's so many different ways these can go is so fascinating. And we alluded to it a little bit, but at the end of the game, depending on decisions you made, either Cassandra, Liliana, or Vivienne is elected as the new Divine. And all three of them, no matter which one ends up being Divine, takes the name Divine Victoria. But yeah, I hadn't planned for it to go this way, but because I think I made a lot of pro-mage, anti-Templar decisions and was nice to Vivienne a lot, and Vivienne ended up being my Divine Victoria. And I think that she is the one that rules with the most iron fist if in her epilogue, and it basically she agrees to open up the College of Enchantment again, but also keeps a lot of mages under the control of the Circle. So me being pro mage too often ended up me being slightly anti mage in the end, which is a little dark irony I wasn't planning on.
It's interesting. My first playthrough, Vivienne ended up becoming the Divine, and I was trying to go for that in this one, and somehow Liliana became it instead. But I didn't end up minding that one.
For me, it was almost the opposite. I was sort of hoping to make Liliana the Divine, but it ended up being Vivienne, probably because I think I was just too nice to Vivienne, or trying to make Vivienne like me when in my dialogue choices with her.
Liliana softened is kind of the direction I wanted things to head in.
I mean, I did do a table mission to try and make Liliana divine, but it didn't. That's not how it happened. But I probably didn't do all the right dialogue choices. I don't know exactly how it goes.
Yeah, I actually think I did the support Vivienne one, and somehow it didn't work out.
It's definitely a hidden statistic with multiple inputs going into it. But if I replay this game, which is a possibility, I'll try to craft it a little bit more specifically to how I want. But anyway, we should move on to the story a little bit. One thing we didn't mention during the Winter Palace quest, after did any of you guys keep Floriane around after she was outed as Corypheus's mole in the Orlesian nobility?
Mm-hmm.
I did.
I did too, and
I
she
did not.
If you don't execute her, she actually can do some good work for you, manipulating other nobles to the Inquisition's cause on the war table. And another reason why the sort of interaction between the more direct events and then indirect war table events is a very fun back and forth in this game. But one thing we didn't mention was that there is a new mage at the Orlesian court that's mentioned a couple times at the beginning of the Winter Palace quests. And then partway through that quest line, it's introduced to be Morrigan from Dragon Age Origins. And Morrigan, basically after the events of the Winter Palace, joins the Inquisition as an advisor. She lets you know, once sort of you get through the Grey Warden stuff and the Winter Palace stuff, that Corypheus is after an artifact called the Well of Sorrows, hidden in an ancient elven ruin. And she also introduces you to Alluvians, which are basically ancient elven teleportation mirrors. You run into Alluvian stuff a little bit in Dragon Age Origins and in Dragon Age 2, where Meryl is trying to find and repair some because they were an important artifact that led to the elves being in power centuries earlier. But Morrigan shows you the Alluvians, but also tells you that the Well of Sorrows at the Temple of Mythal has a lot of power and knowledge that Corypheus is trying to steal. And so the next major story quest is going to the Well of Sorrows to stop him. There's a lot of stuff you can do. If you do a bunch of elven rituals before jumping in to stop Corypheus, you can negotiate with the guardian elves down there diplomatically, with diplomacy, and not by killing all of them. But I jumped in the hole too early, so I ended up killing all of them. And you ultimately, this is the final confrontation with Samson, the leader of the Templars, that ends up being one of Corypheus's generals. And so you fight a huge evil Red Templar version of him as sort of the end boss to this dungeon. But at the end, you do prevent Corypheus from drinking from the well. But I think your choices are to let Morrigan drink, or to you yourself, the Inquisitor, drink from the well, to obtain the secret elven knowledge. And it doesn't affect the main path of the story, which one happens, but it definitely affects what happens between Morrigan and a certain other character. Basically, Morrigan is pushing for her to drink from the well, but if you want, you can seize and do it from yourself, because you maybe because you do not know the consequences of drinking, and maybe you want Morrigan to avoid those consequences. I had Morrigan drink, and the end result was pretty surprising if you don't know what's going on going in. Does anyone want to talk about their decision at the well before we go into what happens to Morrigan and Flemeth and the end game?
My character was an elf. And so, like, on some level, it did make sense for her to inherit, the knowledge of the elves or whatever. But I just felt like Morrigan would know what to do with it better.
Yeah, I drank from the well as an elf mage, kind of seeking to deepen my connection to elven history and all that. The kind of most interesting detail to come out of that, other than the obvious consequence, was that when we went back to Skyhold, Sollosi was like really upset, and it's not like he was like trying to dissuade me from drinking like beforehand, but he ended up like really like scolding me for drinking, like telling me I didn't know what I was doing, what I was getting myself into. And once you get into the later DLC with Trespasser, that really became evident as to why it disturbed him so much. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I had the opposite storyline with him going back to Skyhold because I had Morrigan drink from the well, and it was an interesting confrontation.
What did he say in that? Just curious.
He wanted to know exactly what was going to happen with the Morrigan having all the knowledge and stuff. I'm guessing he just wasn't a very big fan of anyone painting it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can ask him if he wants to drink from it, and he's like very firmly says, "No, don't ask me again."
Yeah, I had that one too.
Well, I mean, moving on, because again, I don't want this episode to run too long. I had Morrigan drink for similar reasons to Paul. I wasn't sure about the consequences, and Morrigan seemed certain that that her drinking was right, and I inherently trust Morrigan, probably because I love the core cast of Dragon Age Origins so much. But what ended up happening was that Morrigan is flooded with knowledge, with ancient elven knowledge, and her son Kieran, who only exists if you either allowed Morrigan's dark ritual to take part at the end of Dragon Age Origins, or if you were in a romantic relationship with Morrigan. So she either has a planned or unplanned pregnancy, depending on the events of Oranges. And if you do the dark ritual ending for Oranges, Kieran will have the soul of an old god inside of him. But because I had Morrigan drink from the well, and I had the dark ritual ending of Oranges, Morrigan's confronted by Flemeth, who sort of has her grandson not under mind control, but wants to take Morrigan's grandson away from her. And in a very tearful event, Morrigan basically tells off her mom. Flemeth removes the old god soul from Kieran and keeps it for herself and departs. But that's only one outcome for this conversation. But no matter what happens, you encounter Flemeth in the Alluvian, in the Fade here, and she informs you that she is in fact the incarnation of the elven goddess Mythal. And it's unclear if Flemeth was once a human who took Mythal's spirit into her, like Anders and Justice in Dragon Age 2, or even Cole and the kindness spirit in this game. That's at least my feeling of how it works. Or if Mythal was like an ancient elf ghost possessing the numerous women that taking the name of Flemeth over the centuries. I have not figured out exactly what their existence is, but the takeaway is that Mythal, the elven goddess, is Flemeth, and now either the Inquisitor or Morrigan has a lot of Mythal's like knowledge and some of their power from drinking from the Well of Sorrows. And after that confrontation, you finally unlock the final battle with against Corypheus. When you confront him, you discover that basically the well tells you that you need to defeat Corypheus's dragon before defeating him. Because that's the anchor that Corypheus has to the mortal world, and if you kill Corypheus without killing the dragon, he'll take possession of a nearby living body and regrow out of them, which you see happen in the Well of Sorrows dungeon. Like the way my version played out is that Morrigan turns into a dragon to stop Corypheus's dragon. And then you are able to take on Corypheus as a group versus the solo Corypheus and eventually defeat him once and for all. And then the Inquisition is victorious. But did it work out differently for anyone else? Like what exactly happens if your Inquisitor is the one that drinks from the well and not Morrigan?
Nothing too different, I think, happens. You just have like a lot more. You like get more kind of the voices from the gods coming in, and you handle it mostly yourself. But that's about it.
One thing that was important for me is during that conversation with Flemeth, where Morrigan says like, "Hey, you were like raising me so you could just take my body or whatever." That was like the entire premise of Flemeth's like villainy in the series thus far. But you find out that she cannot like pass that spirit on like against the body's like the person's will. And so like every replacement for Mythal's like, host or whatever has been willing. And so there is something that Morrigan doesn't know that she would have learned between like rebelling against Flemeth and like whatever the ritual is that moves one soul to the next body or whatever. And so like it sort of just rips out the foundation of like, oh, Flemeth is a bad actor, you know what I mean? And creates like a ton of mystery and lots of questions for me. Sorry.
I went with Morgan as well, and it was one of those, you got to do what's best for the Inquisition. The best thing for the Inquisition is for the Inquisitor to not have some mysterious goo rolling down their throat or what have you. So
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what happens if you drink from the well. I've never done that before in a playthrough, so...
All right, so I mean, maybe we sprinted through the main story of Dragon Age Inquisition there, but there are a couple things I want to talk about before we close off. There are 3 major DLCs to Dragon Age Inquisition. There's a bunch of smaller things like equipment or customization options. We're not going to go into those, but the 3 big ones are called Jaws of Hakon, The Descent, and Trespasser. And those first 2 are sort of they sort of give you new sandboxes. Like you unlock them by by operations on the war table at a certain point in the game, and they give you new areas to explore and a mini storyline to engage in, and we'll get to those soon. While Trespasser is epilogue DLC that you can't start until you've beaten the main game and then re-enter your save file. But starting with Jaws of Hakon, it's a sort of a lush foresty valley area that's a little bit like the Hinterlands, but it's full of rifts and barbarians and occasional demons. You have to sort of help some friendly barbarians take on a faction of evil barbarians that are trying to summon one of their gods back, who's taken the form of a dragon back into the world. So you end up fighting a talking dragon as sort of the final quest of Jaws of Hakon, but it's possessed by a spirit worshipped by old Avar barbarians. So it's a talking dragon that will taunt you as you fight it. It's much more involved than that. You have to solve some puzzles, do a bunch of exploring around this valley area, and you engage with the friendly barbarians quite a bit. I think they're a pretty entertaining bunch. And if you get to all the way to the end of the storyline, rescue the town's sort of mascot bear, and then accept the bear into the Inquisition, it joins you as an agent, which I thought was very, very funny. But the actual quest itself is fun. The difficulty is higher than normal for the rest of Dragon Age Inquisition. This was like the first time I struggled with battles in the game, like from, let's say, level 10 to level 25 was this is where I had the most difficulty, and especially since there's mechanics you deal with in there in the ice dungeon at the end. You have to like light braziers and huddle around them for warmth, and if you get too cold away from a brazier, then you start to lose health and stamina very quickly. So, and you have to fight a boss fight with crowded encounters with these braziers around, but then the final boss can freeze the brazier fires to make you get cold more easily. It's a lot of mechanics to deal with at once, but overall it's at least 4 or 5 hours of content to explore, maybe longer, in an area that's about as big as, say, the Hinterlands or the Emerald Graves. So I thought it was really fun. Does anyone else have a good time with the Jaws of Hakon storyline?
Yeah, I had a great time with Jaws of Hakon. I thought it was overall probably the best like open zone in the game. Probably had like the most satisfying exploration of all of them. I thought like it did like a great job like dividing like this individual map into like a bunch of like sort of distinct pockets, like sort of to the east of where you start in the camp. There's like more like swampy areas. You see like a little fishing hamlet and island you can go to. If you go like north of that, you find the stone bear hold kind of like built like along the side of like a giant like cliff. And Stone Bear Hold, just like other zones had these like little settlements in them that have like NPCs and side quests, but like this one had by far the most personality of all of them, both in terms of like the place itself and like the individual NPCs within it and the side quests they give you. Like where I would kind of blast through a lot of the content or ignore a lot of the content in like previous zones. Like here I was like fully engaged in what was going on, taking up like these smaller side quests, like discovering this exiled Avar who's like too connected to like the spirits, but if you do their quests a certain way, you can actually hire them as like another agent in the Inquisition. There's like this fisherwoman who kind of becomes lost, so you can search for her. So it seems like it's not going to be a very interesting quest, but you discover her like praying to the gods, and like for sort of discovering her and saving her from this little scuffle, you can either choose to let her include you in the prayer if you want to kind of commune a little bit more with the Avar gods, or not, kind of like keep a distance from them. So overall, I just had like a great time exploring this region, and even doing like some of the side content that wasn't really up to the quality I was looking for in previous parts of the game. So, I mean, we talked about in the DLC episode, like ideally a DLC should just like distill all like the best parts of like something from the base game, and Jaws of Hakon did that really well with just a self-contained region.
Yeah, again, I don't mean to diminish what it is, but it's just sort of another self-contained area to explore, but it's a very fun, very layered one of those. So if you just wanted another good chunk to engage with in Dragon Age Inquisition, because I know not all of us managed to get to Jaws of Hakon this time around, it's a very fun one. The descent is a little bit more linear, a little bit more direct. It's basically just a giant dungeon in the deep roads where you're accompanied by two sassy dwarves, one who's a warrior and one who is a part of the Shaperate, which is basically a dwarven scholar. And as you get deeper and deeper in, you find some ancient dwarves wearing armor of pure lyrium who are guarding an array of crystal that appears to be part of the body of a titan. And without getting into too much dwarven lore, because there's quite a bit of it in this game, the Titans are ancient beings that might have been at war with either the ancient elves or the ancient old gods, which are sort of dragon gods, or both. The dwarves are said to be the children of the Titans, so they were either descended from Titans or perhaps first created by Titans. And all of the Titans of the world, based on the lore that this Dwarven Shaper is exploring, are either dead or slumbering deep underground. And one of the Titans stirring in their sleep is what's creating the earthquakes that first led you to this opening in the deep roads. It basically challenges the idea of almost what a dwarf is and what lyrium is, because these ancient dwarves in the deep abyss here don't really resemble modern dwarves much at all. It posits that lyrium is not just a mineral substance, but a living substance, and might even be the lifeblood of these ancient titans. So were the titans defeated by elves and dragons centuries earlier, and now that they're asleep, their blood is being drawn and mined for magic purposes in the modern day? It's kind of wild. You end up fighting a giant crystal golem at the end, and the dwarf warrior accompanying you dies, and the dwarf shaper accompanying with you like makes such a deep connection to the titan that she decides to stay and just learn as much as she can about the this new area you've uncovered. It's kind of wild. It briefly touches on what maybe the history of and the origin of dwarves as a species, and I think it even ties into Veilguard a little bit, because your dwarven party member in one of the new Veilguard trailers has sort of unusual magic powers when dwarves normally can't have magic powers at all, which makes me think that maybe the dwarven origin stories explored in the Descent might be addressed in Veilguard later this year. All of that I find super fascinating. I mean, I'm on the record. I love Dragon Age dwarves. It's like my favorite miniature society within this setting, more so than humans or elves or the Qun. I'm strongly considering being a dwarf again in Veilguard in a couple months. I think the Descent is mechanically less interesting than Jaws of Hakon because it's just a dungeon with a lot of good loot in it, and the boss fight at the end is a bit of a pain in the rear because my party members kept dying because they were making poor decisions with the area of effect attacks that the boss was using. But it's worth checking out if you just want a big old dwarf dungeon to explore and want to hear Solid Snake's voice actor and Liara Tassoni's voice actor have a back and forth banter like an old married couple.
Yeah, it also just felt sort of like a love letter to Dragon Age Oranges, just throwing you back into like basically like maze like tunnels of a dungeon structure and just fighting off like hordes of darkspawn. Like it really brought me back to my Origins playthrough in a positive way. Overall, I thought like it probably had the most satisfying combat in the whole game. Whereas Joseph's Hakon really excelled at exploration, I thought this one just like really honed in on combat. And I just like loved the combat from like level 20 to 25 ish throughout the like these DLCs. In general, I thought just like really like better balance than most of the base game, and fighting off hordes of darkspawn really brought the memories back. So Descent was also quite great.
You also finally have a full kit of abilities to work with. I mean, you mentioned earlier that the combat doesn't really get good in this game until you get to level 8 to 10 ish,
Yeah.
and that's because. But once you have most of a decent wheel of skills to work out in this game, this game's combat is quite fun. But yeah, and I basically agree. Like the Descent is good as a dungeon and combat experience and as a lore experience, but does not have the mechanical richness or side quests or sort of fully realized. It's not the fully realized space that Jaws of Hakon is.
Yeah, for sure.
I think this time when I played it, I was a lot more interested in it than the first time that I played it. And I think it's because of knowing what's coming with Veilguard and knowing we're finally going to get a little bit of insight into where the dwarves fit into this world where the Fate exists. This one struck me a little better this time. Like, okay, now I'm getting built up for like how we're going to resolve all this.
Maybe the Descent isn't required playing for the Veilguard, but I think that some of the things in the Descent will be addressed in Veilguard, specifically with one character that I maybe don't want to spoil in case people are on total spoiler decontamination from Veilguard. But yeah, that is very exciting to me. But we have one more DLC to talk about. It's the biggest, most important one, Trespasser. It's an epilogue to the game. You briefly hang out in the Winter Palace and can see sort of funny or illuminating or touching scenes with each of your 12 core companion characters, including the advisors, minus Morrigan. If you completed the romantic route in the main game, then you can marry your partner in the Orlesian chapel there. In perhaps the shortest fiance to spouse period I remember seeing in a video game, even faster than Dragon Quest V's like 30-minute pregnancy. But whatever, I thought it was very cute. I got to see a much taller Sarah smooch a much shorter Dwarven Inquisitor in my playthrough here. But the gist of Trespasser is there's a summit on what to do with the Inquisition. It's been growing in power for 2 years. Ferelden wants it disbanded. Orlais wants it preserved, but also under the thumb of the Orlesian military. A lot of people within the Inquisition want it to stay independent or maybe be sponsored by the Chantry so it can live in existence apart from Orlais or Ferelden. And over the course of these negotiations, there's a surprise Kunari infiltrator. You basically find a dead Kunari body, and you follow it through a series of alluvions and uncover a Kunari plot to invade the southern half of Thedas, which is basically Orlais and Ferelden. But as you do so, you also are going through a Deep Roads area and some elven ruins, and it's pretty clear that there is a large group of elves that worship Fen Harel, the Dreadwolf, that are opposing the Kunari. And at one point, there's even a message passed between an elf that is serving the Qun and stopped by an elf serving Fen Harel in the Winter Palace. There's basically multiple intrigues going on at once. But the gist of it is Kunari invasion. Fen Harel has an alarming number of followers that you maybe weren't aware of. And everyone in your party is at the Winter Palace with you, other than Solus. But I believe Iron Bull will defect to the Qun if you killed off the Bull's Chargers in his character quest. Bull will stay loyal to you if the Chargers are alive, but he will betray you, and you'll have to fight him if you let the Bull's Chargers die. Is that correct? I mean, I had them survive, but I've only read about this.
There may be like other like world states that can like cause one or the other ways or whatever, but for me, I just saved the Chargers and didn't talk to him too much, but he was still like he didn't betray me.
I think that's maybe the only major character turn other than Solus or other than Solus that happens here. But again, I'm oversimplifying it a little bit. This is a sort of a multi-stage, multi-layered DLC that lasts a good 5 or 6 hours. But the tensions at the negotiations on what to do with the Inquisition escalate. You fight sort of increasingly tough and powerful Qunari over the course of this. And I think we didn't really mention this, but the ultimate tie-in is that you discover parts of what happened to the ancient elven gods, and that Solus is not just an elf interested in the Fade, and is not exactly a god either, but he is Fen-Harel the Dreadwolf. The final cutscene after the credits in the base game shows Solus and Flemeth confronting each other, Flemeth referring to Solus as Fen-Harel, and then him appearing to kill Flemeth. It's unclear exactly what happens to Flemeth and Mythal, because I mean that's a woman who just will not stay dead no matter what happens to her. But oversimplifying it a little bit, over the course of Trespasser, you learn that the elven gods weren't really gods. They were just very, very powerful elven mages that were seizing a lot of power at once. Solus, who was called Solus originally, his real name is Solus, and was given the name Fen-Harel by his enemies. Solus was a rebel elven mage and a very powerful one who led an uprising against the council of these high-ranking elves, and eventually, to stop them from ruling elven society with an iron fist, he separated all of the magic and spirits of the world into the Fade with the Veil. He basically created the Veil, which separates the world of reality from the Fade, where before this, the Fade sort of existed as part of the world, and humans and spirits and magic all existed in the same place. But Solus did this because he thought separating the elven gods from their magic was the only way to defeat them. He was able to seal them away through this sort of, I think it's like, I think they're sealed away in the Veil, and tearing down the Veil will free them. And also have magic return to the world, but also probably destroy the world that's overwhelmed with the giant deluge of magic that's coming in. I might be not getting every single detail right, but Solus was an ancient elf, and he was considered a betrayer god and a trickster god in the centuries of elven lore afterwards, because he opposed the elves in power, and centuries of propaganda cast him as the villain when really he was just a rebel. But Solus created the Fade and sealed himself and the other elven gods away. Sometime before the storyline, he woke up and was incredibly disappointed to see what happened to elven civilization in his absence, and he gave Corypheus the artifact required to tear down the Veil. But Corypheus tried to use it to achieve godhood by reaching the Golden City, or the Black City, that he encountered as a Tevinter mage centuries earlier. And so Solus decided to oppose Corypheus by teaming up with you. But now that Corypheus is gone and the artifact is gone, Solus, who has slowly built an enormous following of elves eager to see elves returned to power and for magic to return to the world, his goal is now to tear down the Veil, restore the Fade to the real world, even if it destroys most of the real world, so he can rebuild in a world with magic where elves can be prominent again. That's Solus's position now. That was a long soliloquy, and I'm so sorry, but this is setting up what everyone thought Dragon Age Dreadwolf was going to be for years, and probably will end up being. Again, we can only speculate on what's going on in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, but the end game of Dragon Age Inquisition is that Solus was a lost elven god all along. The elven gods weren't really gods; they were just the sort of the elves at the top of elven civilization centuries earlier. And now the next confrontation in the world of Dragon Age will be stopping Solus from tearing down the Veil and rebuilding the world with magic. That's a lot. And Aleks, I know this was your first time playing the game, but you were a little bit aware of Solus as the Dreadwolf before you started playing. And at least you indicated that to me before we recorded either of these episodes. What was your reaction to all of this elven lore dump?
It was pretty involving. especially like as a Inquisitor who romanced Solus, like it was like seeing him again at like the very end there was like a genuinely like emotional reunion where like upon like seeing me, like he immediately softened up. My like Inquisitor, I could either like sort of gave me options to either like confront him like sort of aggressively and in disappointment for leaving me behind, or like with like more sort of like understanding and curiosity. So as he sort of like explained this plan of like a sort of like destined like almost genocide in favor of the elves, like it was like I really didn't know what to think for my character, as someone who's been pro elf but has also like worked with this Inquisition full of like people from all different kinds of races and made friends with them. So ultimately I expressed like a little bit of resistance in this confrontation, while also like ultimately being like expressing like, yeah, like to not like support him full on, but also not like abandoning him or wanting to just straight up like kill him in revenge. So it was a very personal sort of lore dump for me, and ended up being like an excellent conclusion of the game. I was super satisfied with it.
This was my first time playing Trespasser, because again, I played Inquisition many years ago without playing Descent or Trespasser, and I knew parts of this just because of stuff leading up to Dreadwolf and just things I had read over the years. But seeing it all laid out just made me more excited for the future, and made me maybe feel more frustrated that it took 10 years to get to the next game, because like the Dragon Age universe balances so many plates. The human politics, the dwarven politics, mages versus Templars, the Blight and Grey Wardens, Tevinter politics, the Qun invading. There's so many things going on at once that I had almost forgotten about the elves as a forgotten civilization and the Dalish trying to reclaim elven heritage. But for Solus to embody that part of the Dragon Age universe and to present himself as possibly the main antagonist of Dragon Age Veilguard with this world-threatening apocalypse level stakes, it's so good. Like it sets up the next conflict so brilliantly that I'm just more excited to get deeper into the world of Dragon Age. Like again, I mean, I said this last year or 2 years ago when I replayed Mass Effect, but these games are so fun and so fully realized that I just kind of want to replay them again and again. But I think for now I'm going to hold off on that and just play Veilguard when it comes out in 2.5 months.
I think what struck me the most with all of the revelations around Solus, especially with how the plan to tear down the Veil is really meant to raise elves back up, is the fact that walking around this world, he has this weird attitude towards a lot of the elves in the world, despite being very pro-elf, where he seems to look down his nose at a lot of them. And he obviously, other races he has limited compassion for, and realizing that this is because, as far as Solus is concerned, he's walking through the world with a bunch of tranquil. All of these people have been cut off from the Fade. Every race has lost something due to the Veil, and to him, these are pitiable creatures that he's looking upon, which I think is really interesting. I think, fully comprehend the first time that that's exactly how the world felt to him. And replaying it, thinking about that a little bit more, a lot of his actions that I couldn't quite decipher before all start to fall into place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also, like, I mean, for a couple of playthroughs, I mean, I played this game a lot before playing Trespasser, and I knew who he was through a lot of those playthroughs, but I didn't know what happened in Trespasser, and I didn't know the details. But he has only been awake for a year as of the start of the game. He ever since he constructed the Veil, he's been asleep, and so like it's not like this is like some 2,000-3,000 year old like grand plan that suddenly came together. Like he did the thing, and he woke up to see like consequences that have sort of matured over thousands of years, and he was like, like he got to see how things turned out, and and he does pity people, and it sucks because it's like standing around a bunch of people who like don't know your history, and they are embracing things that like were shameful, like the Valislin, the tattoos on the face of the Dalish were slave markings, and they are like, yeah, our ancestors wore these, and he's like, not willingly, you shouldn't embrace that. And so like you do, like, once you like get some context that he gives you after he reveals who he is, you can really see like why he is the sort of somewhat cold character, that we know him to be.
And honestly, I was paying more attention to Solus in this playthrough now than I did 10 years ago, because I when I first played the game, I did not know this part of the ending at all. And I think that there's more hints at it than just like scrambling the names of his character quest or other things. Like in the conversation he has with others, there's hidden metaphors and foreshadowing and messages in there. Like he has a conversation with Varric about if Varric suggests that surviving is and not thriving is not necessarily suffering. Like Solus asks him the question: if there's a man on an island who is unable to escape the island, but struggles every day to survive, what's the point? Should he keep fighting and surviving? And he's making that choice and still living. There's a lot of Solus's interactions with your party members are him sort of like confronting the new world he's in and trying to figure out if he thinks it's worth saving or preserving. And ultimately his answer is no, and he goes on this path of tearing down the veil, which is a bit of a bleak ending, but it makes me re-examine everything I thought about Solus going in a way that I think I think it's a good twist and hopefully sets up for a very interesting conflict in the next game. But I don't want to go too in depth about what the next game is. We know a little bit from trailers, and maybe if you've done additional research, there's more. But before we close out, is there one thing from Inquisition or from the Dragon Age world at large that you hope is addressed in Veilguard specifically? I have an answer for this, I guess. I want to see what happened to Isabella, because if she survives the events of Dragon Age 2, she basically disappears, and we know that one of the factions in Dragon Age Veilguard is a Lords of Fortune pirate guild. So I'm just hoping that we see my old love interest from Dragon Age 2 in maybe a position of power as a pirate queen or something. I want to learn more about the pirates of the Dragon Age universe beyond Isabella. But does anyone have a hope or an idea that they hope to see in Veilguard?
I want to see what becomes of Cole.
I need Sandal to return real bad.
Yeah.
With what's going on here, everything that Sandal has stood for since the first game feels like it's going to come finally to a head, and he needs to be at the center of it. For the love of God, please. I've
heard every theory that Sandal is a very powerful spirit, that Sandal is an incarnation of the Maker, aka the god of the entire Chantry, or that Sandal is just Sandal is just Sandal making things go boom. I mean, Sandal is one of the most glaring omissions from this game.
I would be very curious to see if like the canonical universe of Veilguard has Anders living, and if he would interact with Solus and what that would look like.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I kind of just want to see more Dorian, since I know he's into Winter.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody wants to see more Dorian. I agree.
And one of the factions, one of the backgrounds in Veilguard seems to be very similar to what one of the epilogues implies Dorian is doing. Even though the name is different, I'm wondering if there'll be some overlap there.
Yeah, the Veilguard faction is called Shadow Dragons, and they're freedom fighters trying to overthrow the Tevinter Magisters and free slaves. And Dorian becomes a Magister, taking his father's old position, but wants to reform Tevinter from within. So I don't think he is part of the Shadow Dragons, but he might share some goals with the Shadow Dragons. And Neve, I think, is the Shadow Dragons representative. That's one of your companions in Veilguard. So if we can see Dorian into Vinter and possible work with him or even against him, that's fascinating to me. I'm down for all of it. All right, so man, my worst fears have come to life, and this episode is going to be 2 hours. I am so sorry, listeners, but thank you, listeners, for indulging us on this final analysis and exploration and celebration of Dragon Age Inquisition. I had an absolute blast replaying the trilogy over the past 8 to 10 months. I don't know. I don't want to do the calendar math right now, but I mean, if anything, this reinvigorated my love for this franchise that I've enjoyed since the early 2010s, and I'm more excited than ever for the fourth game, which we got confirmed of its release like while we were playing these games. So it's another bullet point of a long list of times that Retro Encounter accidentally preempted a video game announcement. But thank you also so much, Wes, Audra, Paul, and Aleks for playing this game with me over the course of several months. I hope you had as much fun as I did, but I don't know. I think after I play Veilguard a few months from now, I will be about Dragon Aged out for a bit, at least until I feel like supporting Lord Balin again in Dragon Age Oranges. But we're done with Dragon Age, at least for now, on Retro Encounter. We have most of the next month or so planned out. Next week, we're doing another draft episode, and this time it is about From Souls, the Dark Souls trilogy, Demon Souls, Elden Ring, and Bloodborne. We're going to be drafting elements from all of those games in one of our draft episodes. We already recorded that one, and it was a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to see how that one turns out. But also in September, we're playing 3 short games as a way for me to recover from my recent playthroughs of Dragon Age and Dark Souls. We're doing 3 games with each getting 1 episode. And they are Firewatch, Case of the Golden Idol, and Day of the Tentacle. That's 3 narrative adventure games from 3 different decades, getting 3 different Retro Encounter episodes. If you want to reach out to Retro Encounter, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPG Fan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, or probably other places, always as either RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com. If you want to support RPG Fan with your money and not just with your listening at minutes, you can go to rpgfan.com/shop to find 2 storefronts, one with accessories and apparel hosted by TeePublic, and one with a 300-page tome of RPG Fan reviews hosted and sold by Hyperplay RPG. Please support us any way you choose to support us. RPG Fan is also home to 2 other fine podcasts: Random Encounter every other Monday about randomness and what games we're playing, and Rhythm Encounter every other Monday about RPG music. Please listen to Retro, Random, or Rhythm Encounters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or however you choose. And if you choose to leave feedback, I would love for it to be 5 stars out of 5. But if you want to leave us 5-star feedback as panelists and not as podcasts, let's tell them how to find us individually, starting with you, Wes.
You can find me on Twitter at Wes Iliff.
Now, Paul.
You can find me in the RPG Fan Discord as Paul.
Now, Aleks.
You can email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
Now, Audra.
You can email me at audrab@rpgfan.com.
And listeners, you can find me at Evoker for Dogs on either Blue Sky, RPG Fans Discord, or Instagram. And I'm not sure. You know what I think the end result of this is? While we were recording, I went and ordered on Amazon a copy of the short story collection to Winter Nights. So that's going to be my real Dragon Age cooldown before cooldown from Inquisition and warm up to Veilguard.
I did the same thing 2 days ago.
Listeners, thank you. Good night and good luck.